I was scrolling through Facebook Marketplace when I saw someone giving away a bunch of old glass shelves for free. I figured, why not? You can never have too many tanks. But I didn't want the hassle of the extra maintenance. I wanted to build something that was easy to take care of, cheap, and sustainable. With enough plants and a balanced bioload, there's no need for a filter, CO2, or any fertilizers. Nature does all the work. The glass was scored and the edges smoothed out with wet sandpaper. Once everything was prepped, I laid out the panels and sealed them together with silicone to create a watertight container. Or so I thought. As you can see from the soaked paper underneath, the leak test was a failure. So the tank had to be broken down and completely reconstructed. After another 48 hours, the second attempt held water without any issues. Since it was a small tank, I decided to place it on a plant stand in the corner of my room. The peace lily that lived there had to go, which of course meant spilling water everywhere in the process. Once the area was cleared, I laid down a leveling mat and set the tank in its place. It's a 12-inch by 12-inch by 12-inch cube, about 6 gallons of total water volume. It's clean and minimal, but the background was ugly. I opted for a frosted film background, enough to let in some light while hiding whatever distractions were behind the tank. I cut a piece roughly to size, cleaned the back panel with rubbing alcohol, then heavily misted it down with water. The air bubbles under the film were smoothed out with a credit card and the edges trimmed with a blade. Once complete, the tank went back in place. I poured in some leftover contrasoil as a nutrient base layer. Leveled it out and removed it from being visible around the edges. Next, I poured sand around the edges first and filled the tank up with a thick layer of sand, about 2 inches or so. My bucket of river rocks came in handy here. I sorted through the miscellaneous pile and selected a handful that could be good candidates for the scape. I decided on these 3 stones as the key feature. Each one was carefully placed in its respective position. This will be a very simple hardscape since it will be very plant heavy. I added a piece of old manzanita driftwood for a bit more character. I had 2 other pieces laying around that I thought might look interesting on top of the tank as well. With immersed plants, I think it would look pretty cool. Before I could fill the tank, I had to suddenly move. It took a while to get resettled, but eventually the tank was set up in my new apartment. Finally, the first pour of water hit the glass. Most of the plants from my old UNS 60S build were recycled into this scape. I wedged the Bucephalandra in between the rocks without any glue. It should root on fairly quickly. Next, hairgrass filled the foreground along with some other plants. I ran to the store to get new stem plants and added them in as well. Contrary to the last tank, this tank is 12 inches tall, so we have some room to grow vertically. Once filled, I cleared the surface of debris, repositioned the main piece of driftwood, and decided against placing the other 2 branches on top. Then, floating plants were added, but there was a problem. The driftwood also floated since it wasn't waterlogged. Not a huge deal, just annoying. After about 2 days, it finally soaked up enough water to settle back into place. There was a crazy amount of biofilm on the surface. It was time to add a pump to give this tank some flow. I bought a super tiny one since the tank is only 6 gallons. I plugged it in and nothing. The pump was broken. I took it out to troubleshoot. Turns out it just needed a little jiggle. Unfortunately, that little jiggle sent a jet of water out of my tank and onto my wall. The flow was much too powerful for this little tank. So I tucked it down behind the branch to block and diffuse the flow, softening the output. It worked well, but then I remembered it was an adjustable pump, so I just turned it down. Since this tank sits by a window, it won't need much light, more so something flattering for visibility purposes. I bought the cheapest light I could find on Amazon that had an automatic timer built into it. This was like $9 at the time. I plugged it in and it surprisingly gave great coverage and made everything look really good. Two weeks in, things were rough. Algae had taken hold everywhere. Not unexpected since no seeded media was used from my established tanks. I scraped the glass and did a big water change. To help speed up the cycle, I squeezed the gunk out of an old sponge filter from another tank into the water. Gross? Sure. But that nasty brown sludge is packed with beneficial bacteria. It's one of the fastest ways to kickstart a new tank. A couple of weeks and a few water changes later, things are looking good. The hairgrass is ridiculously tall for the foreground. The stem plants are growing quite well, but a couple are struggling. There's also a few patches of algae. And I just noticed this little wormy thing. Speaking of little hitchhikers, of course, some snails made their way into the tank from the plants as well, and have even started laying eggs for repopulation. I appreciate the work they do, keeping algae at bay so I don't have to do as much maintenance. One snail was grazing when another crept up from the rear and attacked. The first snail swung its shell around, desperately trying to shake the attacker. Finally, after a few minutes of flailing, the attacker withdrew and retreated in defeat, or victory. I'm not really sure, honestly. But then he stalked his victim and attempted a second round. The flailing continued. And a few minutes later, the attacker released. I'm not sure what this behavior is, but it was wild to watch. I vigorously trimmed the hair grass to train it to stay short. I love when freshly cut plants purl like this. Then, I cut the stem plants and replanted the cuttings, hoping to get this tank looking a bit more full. The plants on the left side pretty much all died, so I had to fill that area with some new stem plants. Slowly but surely, the layout was coming together. With the fish on the way, a lid was my next priority. I picked up a piece of plate glass from Home Depot and scored it to size. I tried to break it and yeah, what a terrible break that was. I tried to fix it, but inevitably made it worse. The fish was almost here. With time running out, I improvised, shifting the light over and using what I had. Our fish arrived a few days early from SD Tropicals. I opened the box to it being well packed and well insulated. The bag was floated in the tank to acclimate slowly. After about 30 minutes, it was time to introduce him to his new home. I gently released him into the water and quickly secured the lid. Bettas are known jumpers, and there was a sizable gap in the back, so I placed a cover on it just to be safe. This isn't just any regular old Betta. It's a male, wild type Betta embellis. Fresh out of the bag, he looked a little washed out from the stress of shipping, but even then, his beauty was undeniable. The light caught the iridescent blue-green shimmer of his scales against his dark body, and the tail pattern and coloration was simply amazing. Sleek, subtle, and elegant, in a way that excessively bred Bettas just can't replicate. He immediately started exploring, weaving through the plants, rocks, and driftwood, curiously checking out his snail tank mates. Every now and then, coming up to get a gulp of air from the surface. He even started hunting the first day. I figured he might be hungry, so I dropped in some pellets. He wasn't interested. The next day, I tried to feed him with some Vibra Bites instead, and he was eating like a champ. I finally took the initiative to get a more proper lid for the setup. I moved the light from the left side to the center, where it was initially supposed to be. I went to Lowe's where they actually cut glass for you, and had them cut two pieces. The larger piece is for the back, and the smaller piece for the front. A strip of clear tape made a simple hinge, allowing for easy opening and closing. There was still a bit of a gap in the rear though, but that too is easily fixed with some clear packing tape. Now the lid looks sleek and is escape proof. A few weeks later, I checked on the tank and saw what I thought could be a bubble nest. I wasn't sure. Maybe it was just air buildup from the pump blowing around. The next day when I looked, it was gone. But there were other bubble nests scattered on the other side of the tank. And the next day, those were gone too, but he had built a bigger one where the original one was. Our boy was working hard. It was official. He'd reached sexual maturity. I was finally able to catch him in the act, methodically surfacing, taking gulps of air, and releasing one single bubble exactly where he wanted it. It was meticulous and calculated work. There was something really compelling about watching him operate so deliberately, even with no females around. Watching him build was seeing pure instinct come to life. Quiet, focused, and purposeful. Fast forward a couple more weeks and there's still some algae, but nothing too wild. I removed what I could and added a few more plants to help with nutrient export, since the plants are the only filter in this aquarium. Our Betta curiously investigates the new surroundings in his home, diving in and out of the textured leaves. Everything is running perfectly. The plants have filled in and the tank has settled into a quiet rhythm. But then, while doing maintenance literally right before taking the closing shots for this video, I knocked the lid down and shattered the corner. I got to work cleaning up the mess, but when I was finished, the tank was still. I searched, and then I found him, dried up in the corner behind the stand. After all that care, all that patience, and all that effort to make sure there was nowhere for him to jump, he jumped. It's one of those lessons that you eventually learn the hard way. You can try to control everything, but accidents do happen. Still, his little ecosystem lives on. And 6 months later, nothing inhabits the tank as of now. The plants are doing great, but I am, however, adding liquid fertilizer to supplement for the lack of livestock waste. Life must go on. For now, it will act as a nice plant holding tank until I can figure out a new game plan.